Thank you for joining us today. My name is Saqib Razzaq, and welcome to Colourful Heritage's last episode of our weekly series called Herstory. As you know, in this series, I've been having a number of conversations with some inspirational Scottish South Asian women, taking a closer look into their lives. And I've explored and found out more about their personal and career journeys and asked them to share with us some of their unique experiences and the lessons that they have learned. So in today's episode, I would like to introduce my special guest this week, Mrs. Farkhanda Chaudhry. She's Scotland's first South Asian female Justice of the Peace. Farkhanda was born in Pakistan and arrived in Glasgow as a toddler, and she's grown up in Glasgow, being schooled at Bellahouston Academy in Glasgow. And at a very young age, she involved herself in community work and voluntary work. Her career started within the youth work sector and expanded to working more broadly around community development, equality, and training as well. She's been involved in many organisations and projects over the years, reflecting, of course, her interests in interfaith work, women's development, and social justice. So utilising her experience, she readily gives her time to support a number of organisations in their growth and development. And has also taken up many public roles in her life, notably as a commissioner for Scotland with the Women's National Commission. She is the first South Asian and Muslim female to be appointed as a Justice of the Peace in Scotland and served on the bench for over 20 years as a magistrate. In 2004, she was also invited to speak at Reflection Time at the Scottish Parliament, and she's also one of the first South Asian women to have been awarded an MBE in 2004 for her work around equality and diversity. She's a mum to 5 children and currently works full-time in a public sector organisation at a corporate level. Good afternoon, Auntie Farkhanda. Lovely to have you on today's episode. How are you today?
I'm fine. Thank you very much for inviting me along.
Oh, no problem. Our pleasure. I want to welcome you to this series and also thank you for taking part in this conversation and, of course, agreeing to share your story and your unique experiences with all of us. And we have a global audience, so we have people from all over the world that are joining in today, including Pakistan, Australia, a number of places. So it'd be great to hear your story. And I'd like to start by asking you actually to, first of all, describe your childhood in Glasgow, and in particular, your friends while you were growing up, school life, family life, and, your father as well.
Okay, so we, like most of the Pakistanis that came over, life began in Gorbals. Mm-hmm. And from there we moved to East Pollokshields, and probably one of the first families that moved to East Pollokshields. And I went to the school in that area, which was Albert Drive School. And so at that time, there weren't a lot of Asian children in the school. Mm-hmm. There were 1 or 2. And I just remember probably my childhood is a very happy childhood with a kind of group of friends. I also remember actually being able to run around outside our houses and in the back lanes and in the closes and the gardens, which is a little bit different, I think, for many children's experience now. So we were able to play, as we would call it, around the block, which doesn't happen now. So I kind of just remember happy memories of being a child in that area. And and as I was growing up, then obviously many more Asian families moved into the area.
And did you find when you were, so you said you were able to go out and play freely in beside your house or in the block, in the closes, obviously tenements and Pollokshields. Did you find you had made many friends that were, not South Asian, from the sort of Indigenous community, and especially at school? What was school like for you?
Of course, simply because of the fact that there weren't, we were maybe 2 or 3 of us in the class who were also friends. So there was a a really good friend of mine, still is an Indian girl. And then there was also one other Pakistani girl. And we had to be part of the group. So we had many Scottish friends as well. And, you know, that's the way it was at that time.
And what about your sort of family life? I know that in terms of your father, for example, I know your father, being Nazir Chaudhry, played a huge role in civic engagement in Glasgow in the early days with other members such as Uncle Fateh Sharf. Tell me a little bit more about how much of an influence was your father in your line of work, or in your, as you were growing up?
I suppose as a child growing up and seeing him very much actively engaged within the communities, and I say within Pakistani community, but he was very much engaged in the wider community as well.
That's right.
And so I grew up actually seeing that. And I remember once that he took me to a church. He was speaking to the people within the church about what it means to be a Muslim and about Islam. And so for me, that was, you know, if you think about it, so many years ago, the fact that he's taking his child to a place of worship of another faith, I obviously didn't realize that was actually a very kind of radical thing that he did for his time. And I was very much, listening to him speaking. And even at that age, I was like, yeah, this is something that I want to do when I grow up, you know. So he influenced me in that way, in terms of engaging with people, really. And no matter, you know, who they are. And he had friends across the board. And also, I remember as a child that he had stood for a councillor, so to be an elected member in the area of East Pollokshields.
Right.
And I remember as a child running up and down the closes with leaflets. So whatever you call it, you know, so we were, all the children were going up and down those closes. Got really tired that day, but also excited as well. So that kind of engagement and being able to see my father kind of aspiring in this way for the good of the community is something that's always kind of stuck within me.
Right. And I guess that, I mean, I know that you're involved in interfaith work for, you know, a fair amount. So, and the fact that you're influenced by your father. So why is the interfaith work important for you? And obviously, you know, why was it important for your father?
I think interfaith work is important because it's one of the approaches or the methods or models really to engage with other people, to get to a place where you can hear what they're saying and they can hear what you're saying, and able to understand each other, you know, much more broadly than just a general conversation. So you're kind of getting to the point of how is it that the other person takes, especially from a faith perspective. And so I've been involved in kind of interfaith work, I think, before it became popular. So at a time when interfaith was kind of really seen as, well, it's these kind of really strange people that want to do this kind of dialogue, but the crux of it is about dialogue. So it's been important to me for that reason. But as you go along, you know, until we get to this point, you also begin to see why these kinds of dialogues are very important in building relationships, which can go beyond just thinking about the them and us, but actually about, we have lots of things in common. And yes, we can also talk about the things that we don't have in common and begin to understand them as well.
I mean, a very important point made there, that it's about open dialogue and, I guess, sharing your experiences, and it's about educating other people as well. So, you know, you're learning, and I don't think you ever stop learning, and also you're educating others from other faiths about, you know, yourself, so that, you know, these people then are able to take it away into their own communities, into their own people, and, you know, share experiences and, you know, really just learn from that. So I wanted to now just start off about you in terms of, you told me that when you were younger, you'd had your children, and at that point, you know, you then started getting involved in some sort of volunteering. You said you started at the Darnley Street Family Centre. You attended, and that's where you started to initially sort of voice your opinion, you express yourself, and you felt that was really taken on board, and that gave you the confidence to go further. Tell me about your volunteering experience there and how that actually helped you. You know, it led to obviously a variety of opportunities for you, actually almost like as a springboard. Tell me a bit more about that experience.
Yeah, I think just to kind of put that into context, you know, when you're a mother and you're a wife, and you know, you've got all of these different roles, and you can spend many years just within those roles, and that's what you're seen as. And I suppose for myself, when I started to kind of interact or engage with the local community centre, there was an opportunity to actually find other roles for me. So not about saying that devaluing being a mother or you know, all of these things, but really kind of really getting the sense that, well, actually I have got value as well as a person, as an independent thinking human being. And so this is what I would say, that in terms of that process in the Darnley Street Family Centre, that process was taking place. And actually the ethos of the community centre was very much about empowering the local community. And so I initially started there because you could attend classes, and there was creche, which is a very key point for many women. You know, where do you take all your children with you, and you can also learn as well? It's a key access point. So I was able to do that, but slowly I got involved within the actual committee, and then I became the chair of the local of the actual centre.
Right. Okay.
And this, in terms of the experience of volunteering, because then you were interacting in a space which had an ethos, you were beginning to understand what that ethos was around anti-discrimination, anti-racist practice, and you were seeing how that in practice was being kind of delivered in a sense. And so my volunteering gave me all of that experience, and also gave me that sense of, yes, what I'm saying actually has got value, or actually people are listening to what I'm saying, which actually can be lost, as I said, in that kind of, when you're in that whole kind of role of motherhood.
Yeah. No, that's an amazing message, actually, I think, to a lot of our viewers, especially young mums, because you get so engrossed in what you're doing on a daily routine that, you know, sometimes you think, when will I be able to come out of this, or when can I move on? But it's amazing to hear that you, mashallah, moved on and achieved so much more after having your children. That's amazing. I know that you started within this youth work sector and expanded to work more broadly around community development, equality and training. Tell me what kind of work you did in the youth sector, and then obviously in community development as well, and also how did you get into training?
Okay, so there's quite a lot there, so you just need to prompt me as you.
No, that's fine. So if you start off with how you started off with sort of working in the youth sector initially, and then we'll move on to community development.
So I would say that working in the youth sector, it was in the local, it was in the local area. I got some kind of employment within the local community centre, a different one, and I worked as the youth officer, working with the Asian girls in the area.
Right.
And so I did that for some time, and so as part of my role, it was about not only working with them, but also as you know, that there has to be an environment created for those young people, that parents also trust that they're in a safe place. So it was also about ensuring that you're building relationships with the parents as well as the young people, as well as the young girls.
Yeah.
And so from there, I got an opportunity to actually work around youth and development work, actually within the local centre, which I was the chair of, but then I also got some paid employment there. And really, I would say that because of the experience which and skills which I had built up over the years through the volunteering work,
Okay.
and having knowledge of the sector, which kind of probably allowed me to, take a step into that role, working with young people, but also within the community. And so from there, I then began to work with an organisation called the Poverty Alliance. So it was working around issues of poverty. And again, when we talk about community development, it's actually about saying that, well, in terms of the knowledge and expertise of what's happening to people, it is actually the people themselves. So you work and facilitate a process which is about bringing what their needs are to the table. So around poverty, especially around race and poverty, it was about actually gathering that information and then seeing what we can do with this. So that took me into a national organisation, which was the Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations. And so I was working at a national base. And I strongly follow the kind of the approach of community development. So the majority of my work was really about facilitating processes which can get people to a stage where either the organisation they're aspiring to is developing, or their own personal development is going in the direction that they want to go in.
Okay, and I guess, from there you got involved in training, and I guess you would have been devising sort of training courses to give to younger people or to other kinds of audiences. How did you get involved in that?
Well, I mean, in terms of training, I would say that it's something that probably took hold from the time of the community centre as a volunteer, because I picked up all of these skills. And one of the things at that local level, I was feeling that there isn't enough Asian women that are involved within committees. And so I began to organise committee skills training for Asian women, and within the language that they spoke. So it gave them access to really kind of thinking about what this work's all about, from someone who's already has been involved in committees, but also gives them that kind of sense that they can do it as well. So my training journey started very early on. So from that then expanded to many other areas of kind of equality and diversity topics, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so I've had the kind of opportunity to be able to deliver training sessions or spaces for dialogue, etc., at many different levels, and I'm really, really appreciative of that.
Do you think, just from your answer there, do you feel that, that has changed now in terms of women being part of committees, especially sort of South Asian women? Do you think there's a difference now compared to maybe when you first started this work? Do you think there's a big difference?
I would have to say that there isn't a big difference. And I think that's because you have to place it in the wider context of gender equality, and looking at even like public appointments. There is a need for more women to be involved within kind of boards, etc. And that's an issue not only for Asian women, but also minority ethnic women, but also women in general. But out of all of that pile, then minority ethnic women come at the bottom of that. So I don't think it's changed substantially, because we're up against we're up against a system, really.
Okay. Well, what do you think then we can do to try and address that? What do you think needs to be done then? Do we need more women to come forward to help do this kind of training, or to take part, or building confidence of people to be able to sit on a board or a committee? You know, what do you think needs to be done?
Yes, I think it's got to be at all those levels, and there are, you know, alhamdulillah, you know, great that there are many other minority ethnic women leaders just now within Scotland.
Oh yeah.
Who have taken on that kind of challenge and are working at many different levels in organizations, but also individually as mentors to really kind of look at what can be done. So we can make the effort. So what I'm saying here is that you need to still, you know, make the effort no matter what the outcome is, because it's about the effort. And even if you get 2 more women that have increased their confidence and have actually been supported to get there, then that's an achievement.
Yeah, and I think I wanted to highlight at this point that you told me that you have a diploma in equalities and some kind of equalities and discrimination. So I guess my point here is that you don't have to have, you know, you don't have to be somebody that holds a high degree or anything like that. It's about the sort of passion that you have. It's about wanting to be involved, and like you said, you learned these skills through volunteering, so you built up your skill base through the work that you've done, you know, through actual experience rather than through sort of education as such. It was more about the kind of work you probably did when you were younger and you saw your father doing, and then, you know, getting involved in this kind of work later on as well. I wanted to highlight actually to our viewers that you were a commissioner with the Women's National Commission, and that you were involved in the early development of the Muslim Women's Network. I want you to tell me some information about how you got involved in that. Okay. And also, you know, I want to know what is your passion and what motivates you to do the work that you do?
Okay, so in terms of the Women's National Commission, it was a commission that sat in London, so it was about raising issues and around policy development with the Westminster government around women's issues across the UK, and so I had to apply for it, and so I, you know, applied for it and then had an interview, and so through that process I kind of became a commissioner. Okay. And part of my kind of always, I think, part of why I do things is how does what I do also benefit others, especially women. So as a commissioner, then part of the work at that time, we had a number of women from different parts of the country who were already engaging with the Westminster government around Muslim women's issues. So what I did as part of my work as a commissioner was to support the development of the Muslim Women's Network, so in those early stages. It is now an independent organisation called the Muslim Women's Network UK. So my kind of role within that was to actually support it in its early development. And I'm glad to see that it's still around.
Right, amazing. Yeah, I mean, I guess there are more and more women now engaging. What kind of time period was this?
What kind of time?
Time period. Round about when was this that you'd applied to be a commissioner? Are you talking in the 90s or early 2000s?
Oh, no, you're looking at the early 2000s, or maybe around 2005, something like that.
Something like that. Okay.
2006, around that time.
And so I guess you were already in sort of full-time employment at that point as well, and you're taking on other extra roles. Mm-hmm. So like you said, you know, the kind of things that motivate you. So how do you give back then?
Well, probably one way of giving back is supporting others. So, and that's about mentoring. And you know, I think nowadays I do a lot of work which is in the background rather than in the public face.
Okay.
Mentoring and supporting where I can, but also because I've learned, you know, I have skills around organizational development and, you know, building organizations. So I give back to a number of organizations by helping them in their growth. So they'll kind of call me, and I might, do some development days with them. So in this way, I give back to them.
It's amazing. I mean, I just think, you're involved in sort of working, you're giving back. You must get asked to be on boards or committee members from all sorts of, organizations. How you must manage your time and juggle all this. But, we'll come back to that a little bit later on. But also my understanding is that in 1994 you became Scotland's first South Asian woman who became a Justice of the Peace. And my understanding is that this is a position of responsibility that you are publicly appointed for. So can you first of all explain to me what is a Justice of the Peace, and what it means to be a Justice of Peace? And then we'll come on to other questions related to that.
So a Justice of the Peace is effectively you are a judge. And so you sit on the bench, you take trials, you make decisions, and so you're basically doing the same kind of work that a sheriff might be doing, but only probably at a little at a lower level. But you wear your black gown and you go up. All of that is within that. You also in the middle of the night can be called by the police because they want to make they want a warrant to be signed. Right. So there's all sorts of things that you need to be able to do as a Justice of the Peace.
And I mean, that's fascinating that it seems like a really important role. And so this is something that you were publicly appointed for. So how did that come about?
Again, you need to make an application.
Right.
You need to have actually references from people, and that was many years ago. This is the way it happened. And so then there's a group of people that would take your application, just like an interviewing process, and they would then kind of decide whether you have the qualities of becoming or the skills of becoming a Justice of the Peace. And this is something that any one of us can do.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's not, you don't need to have a legal background. In fact, it's probably discouraged for you to have a legal background.
Right.
Okay. This is actually about lay people. So ordinary people that can be part of that kind of decision making around this. And this is unique to some countries. It's to Britain, Australia. I'm not sure of Canada. So there's a number of countries where you can become a lay judge.
Wow. And you did this for over 20 years, my understanding is. So how did you feel when you became a Justice of the Peace? I mean, it sounds like quite a huge position of responsibility. What was your feelings when you were told, okay, you've been accepted and you've got this role?
I suppose for me it was a very scary feeling, because this is you challenging yourself, isn't it? You're challenging yourself. You're out of your depth in some ways. So it's an unknown. And so that was a kind of feeling that I had, obviously a bit of excitement, but much more so, oh my God, what actually have I got myself in for, So, but that's what you need to do, when you're challenging yourself. There are bits which you are going to be scared of. Yeah. But you have to take those steps if you feel that you want to develop yourself further.
Yeah, no, that's I can completely relate to that. There's been experiences in my life where I felt, oh my goodness, what have I let myself in for? Can I do this? Can I not? And then I think I accept it as a personal challenge and think, right, just move forward and don't look back, and just little baby steps, and just keep going and just chipping away at whatever the challenge is. Okay, so move on to, I know that you were sent to Iraq on secondment from a local council around about 2003, and there you worked around women's development within Iraq. So what kind of work were you involved in there, and how was that experience for you?
So my role within, I was in the south of Iraq, and my kind of main role was to work with the women within that area to support them in whichever way they wished that they needed that support, but also because I was based in it was a political development unit. And so within that, it was also about supporting the women to be engaged and kind of engaged in the politics that were emerging at the time. So just imagine that you've got Westminsters in London, and this is in Glasgow, but there isn't a Scottish Parliament. So actually you need to be able to get your connections in London. So part of my role was about supporting and encouraging women to actually be able to have their voices and contribute to whatever the political development was happening, especially around women's development at that time. And my role was to support them. So that might be through training, that might be through helping them set up their own organizations, or helping them to think about what it means to have a kind of collective action, rather than just individuals wanting what they need, but what does it mean for, women's development? So my kind of role was to support them in that.
Fascinating. I guess when my as a mum, as a woman, I'm thinking, I know that you were out there for about a year. What was going through your mind when this position arose? Was it a hard decision for you, or was it easy? How was it for you?
I suppose in terms of, again, my own kind of perspective is that doors have opened. And so you do have choices as to whether you go through those doors. But my kind of intuition has always been, well, the door is there because I have to go through it, or I'm meant to go through it, or there's a reason why I'm meant to go through there. So it wasn't difficult in those terms, but it was difficult for the family, obviously, because they were, that was during war. So they were very much, my daughters were, our grandchildren need you, so God forbid something happens to you, but whatever you're destined to, what your fate is, wherever you're going to die, you're going to die. So that wasn't an issue for me, but for the family, it was a big thing. And it took some time to really kind of get to a point where they were also happy that, I was doing this. The interesting thing is that when I kind of arrived in Basra and began to work with the women, they were really, really surprised to see someone like them.
Right.
So and so I think that's probably why I was there.
Yeah, I was going to say what eventually, obviously there's a lot of choices there, but what eventually made you decide, right, I have to do this? Because it was very easy to turn around and say, actually, no, this is not for me, because that was a difficult time period. Mm-hmm. So what motivated you then to go out to a war zone in Iraq at that time, dangerous times?
I suppose was the sense that, if I can contribute anything to the women, because obviously you're looking at a political context there as well. But for me, it was what can I do to support and help women in that area. So that was probably my kind of biggest reason for being there. Ask that question again.
No, I was just asking that, how was, what motivated you? Because it was such a dangerous period, it's such a dangerous time to be out there, when you first told me that you were in Iraq, that was a shock for me. It was quite a surprise for me. So I'm just wondering what motivated you to go out there and to help these women.
Reason. And secondly, again, that whole thing about, well, it's an unfamiliar situation, isn't it? It's an unfamiliar space. So there's also going to be a whole load of learning that I'm going to be doing, and that all builds up to who you are. And coming back, I was very, very humbled because, you're seeing people with such resilience. We haven't really seen that kind of war here in the UK. So our generation has not seen that. So we're probably, are quite complacent about that, what that means. But when you're in a space where that is happening at the time and people are still trying to get on with the kind of daily life, it's and you kind of see that, and you see the hope that people have even in that adversity. So I did a lot of learning myself and also thinking about who I am in all of that as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like you said, it's not something that we in the UK face, in such kind of circumstances. You see it on TV, and then, when you switch off the TV, that's it, you move on. So, but to be in that space, that must have been a really difficult and scary time for yourself as well. I want to move on now to in 2004. So when you came back from Iraq, you were awarded an MBE, Member of the British Empire, from the Queen in recognition of your work around equalities and women's development. Now, we spoke about this in one of our sort of earlier conversations. So share with me your feelings at the time, what was going through your head. I know that you said you were reluctant to accept this award. So tell me a little bit more about that particular, getting that award.
Yes, when it was intimated to me that I'm being considered for this, my reluctance really was that, this is the member of the British Empire, and doing the work which I do, and, having that kind of knowledge that, MBE is about, where does it come from? It very much, it kind of can link into the whole sense of colonialism and imperialism. And so if you're working around equalities and you're working around race equality, and it doesn't sit very comfortably. And so my feelings of reluctance was very much around that. So when I spoke to my family, especially my children, so what should I do here? And so for them, they understood what I was saying, and agreed that there is that side of it. But they also felt that in terms of history, they were saying, well, your children's children and children's children's children, whoever will be able to look back and actually see a figure who had that kind of prominence. And that, again, doesn't sit very comfortably with me. But in terms of what they were saying, I kind of saw that perhaps that is that I should accept it, because it's going to be a legacy for them as well. So that's why I accepted it.
And I guess, it's almost sort of sending that message out there to other women as well, that, whatever you can do, you never know where it can lead to. It can get this kind of recognition. It almost acts almost as though it's like a role model. You're obviously, you are a role model, but it's having that recognition that, you've done something for women in particular. Yeah. So no, that's really, thank you so much for sharing that. Actually, story is quite a personal story, I guess. And I know that around about that same time, you were also invited to the Scottish Parliament. You were probably one of the first Muslim women to speak on reflections in Scottish Parliament around about 2004. Share with me how that came about, and how did you manage to? Why were you invited for? What were you invited to talk about there?
Okay, so the Scottish Parliament are always looking for people from diverse communities to be able to come and speak before they start their sessions on a particular day. And I think obviously part of it is to ensure that you have those diverse voices heard within the Scottish Parliament. And so I was invited through the Scottish Interfaith Council at the time. And so I spoke about justice. And I spoke about justice from two aspects. One, from the aspect of being a Muslim and what that might mean, but also a kind of a general message to the people within the Parliament that the core of our business has got to really reflect justice and fairness, if we really want to ensure that our country and moves forward in a way that everybody feels that they belong to that space.
Amazing. And I guess in 2011, the National Galleries of Scotland had commissioned like a handful of portraits of influential South Asians in Scotland, and of course you were one of those people that were chosen for this particular sitting, and I know there was several others as well. You were photographed by, I think it's Verena Jacob for this portrait, and you actually chose, and I remember when this picture was released, you chose to have the women in your family photographed with you at that time. So tell me about how that came about, and how and why you made that decision for just the women in the family to be photographed.
I think my life experience, including, you know, getting the MBE, all of these things, that I didn't feel that within the communities that was really kind of celebrated. So that visible public from the kind of gender side of things, when men were achieving, it was celebrated massively. You know, so you would all know that such and such has done this or whatever. And I felt that in this photograph, I wanted to reflect the visibility of women. So I know that, again, this was probably a very bold and radical thing to be doing. And I know my grandson, eldest grandson, who will be listening to this, did ask me as a little, I don't know maybe he was about 5 or 6, I don't remember what age he was, but he did ask me, Nanny, why wasn't I in the photograph? And so I said to him, son, you'll know when you grow up, you'll understand when you grow up. But I felt bad about it as well. But I had this kind of, that's what I felt that I need to do with this image, is to present an image with the women of all generations. So from my mother down to my granddaughters. So I hope my grandson will forgive me for that.
No, I remember when I saw that picture, I thought it was quite a powerful thing to do, because all the other pictures involved, you know, the specific people, but with their whole families, and here you are with just the women in your family. And I remember reading the description underneath as well, thinking that's amazing to take that kind of a step, and it's a really powerful message for women that, you know, we on our own can do something amazing. You know, we can help to change things, or we can contribute and be part of something. And so that was, I really appreciated that picture at the time. And it just goes to show that you can do so much more. So tell me about now then, you know, you're working as not quality officer, I forget what your role is just now, but tell me about, you're working in the equality department. So what's your role at the moment then within the council that you're working in? What are you working on at the moment?
My role is to support community groups, especially community groups that are from different equalities areas, to become stronger and be able to really engage within the council around their own issues. So it's taking out, you know, that's what it should be. You have a kind of a direct line between the council and people that are able to say what their needs are. So I'm working around that. I'm working around training, delivering different types of training, and also just supporting the council broadly around their equality strategies.
Right, amazing. And what about, share with me a little bit more about your role working in equalities?
Can you give me a little bit more? What are you looking for?
So you were working in the equalities, so maybe in any of your previous roles, you know, equality training, for example. Tell me a little bit more about what kind of things you were involved in, or what kind of groups, if there's anything specific you want to mention or highlight.
I suppose in equalities, I suppose very much linked to perhaps my kind of passion around all of this is around kind of creating spaces where, you know, people can actually get together and be able to explore their own attitudes, explore and self-reflect, and be able to kind of look at the world in a different light, you know. So I would say that in terms of the kind of equalities work, this is one of the areas especially around delivering different types of training, that I feel currently that this is the space that I want to be in the most, where generally I also see that it's very impactful on individuals as well.
So as a working mum yourself, and of course you had your children very young and then moved on to, your career at that point, whereas very often women focus on having careers initially and then they'll have a family, and then sometimes that can come to a stop, sometimes they'll move back into work. What kind of advice would you have for, our viewers, working mums or young mums that are taking a career break and would like to return back to work? What kind of advice would you give to somebody like that, somebody, one of the young mums?
I think if you've taken a career break, and I think that it can be, it feels as if it's quite difficult to get back in. So perhaps when you've taken a career break, you should still engage in different ways, and part of it is volunteering as well. And when we're talking about volunteering, it doesn't mean that you go off in a way that you're not looking after your children. You can be volunteering in organizing the local play schemes. So there's ways that you're still connected with your children, but also volunteering, because that enables you to still stay in there in terms of alternative spaces. It builds your skills and your networks as well. Secondly, I would say that look for what your passion is. So perhaps you've taken a great career break and you're now thinking, I want to be doing something different.
Yeah.
So actually just, have a moment of self-reflection and think, well, what do I really want to do? And from those questions, you might be saying, well, I'm actually quite happy just being who I am and looking after my children. Absolutely fine. Or you might be saying, yes, this is the area I now want to go in. So if you set yourself that vision, you set yourself that goal, then you need to look for ways that how you can actually get there. Now, you might get there not in 2 years because now you have children, etc., or you don't have the support that's required for you. You might get there in 5 years. It's okay. It's all about the journey, isn't it? So it's really what motivates you. Why is it that you want to do something, or why is it that you want to go that way? So is it about economy? Is it about your self-development? So you need to have answered all of those questions before you really kind of take that step. Because if it's about, I need a job just now because of money, then that'll be a different route to, well, actually this is my passion and I want to get there, and that'll be a different route.
Amazing. That's amazing advice. Really, I think that really hits home to me, because I've had to have a change in direction from what I used to do to what after I've had the family, and now my interest and passion lies elsewhere. And I guess the bottom message for mums or for other people as well is that to keep connected, to keep that link. Like you said, it could be something just local. It doesn't have to be something national or any other level. It could be something just local where you're helping people or getting involved and learning something. So all the time you're learning something. I just want to actually thank you again. Say thank you to Auntie Farkhanda Chaudhry, our guest for today, for taking the time out and sharing your story and giving us valuable words of wisdom, gems. And the fact that you've highlighted that you have achieved so much after having your children. You went on to do what your heart wanted to do. Your passion lies in helping others, in equality. I just feel that's amazing to have you on, to hear your story from you yourself. And I think over the last 4 weeks, we've heard amazing stories from other South Asian women in Scotland who have broken the mould and overcome many challenges in their life to become role models for all women, not just from the South Asian community, but for all women. And I think that shows they're true examples of global citizens. And I hope that the Herstory series has highlighted to us all some of the remarkable achievements of these women, and that watching this series You might have felt inspired to get involved in something, whether it's world changing, whether it's community work, volunteering, applying for a job, or just simply taking on some advice that's helped to better your life and the lives of others. So thank you very much for tuning into this week's episode, last episode of Herstory with myself, Saqib Razzaq, and Farkhanda Chaudhry. Please like and subscribe to our Colourful Heritage YouTube channel, where you can catch all 4 episodes of our Herstory series that you might have missed. Take care and goodbye. Thank you very much, Auntie.